All right, so I've got it all dusted off. I actually wiped it off with some water, just a wet rag, get even more dust off. This is not a fine piece of furniture, so I'm okay, you know, tapping into. But this is the stuff I love using. It's I use a gloss on it, a warm gloss, but the Minwax oil-based, because that's going to bring out the tone. Unlike, you just won't see that with a water base. I'm sorry, but okay. And then the other thing that I do is, if you've been around some of my projects, is that's water in there, even though that's an oil-based brush. So that's water inside there. That's how I keep my brushes for maybe 5, 6, 7 days or something, in and out, in and out, in and out. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go outside right now and just shake that off on a piece of scrap wood or something, and I'll dry it with a rag before I stick it in my pail. Okay, so I took it outside and I shook it against a piece of scrap wood, right? And you really get 95% of that water out of there. Dry it off a little bit with a rag, but it's still got, it's still oily. This works, you know, and it really saves on. I never use thinner anymore. I hate the smell of that stuff, and you can't get it off you for 2 or 3 days, right? So we're gonna get going on this. And again, if it were a fine piece of furniture or for a client, then I would take the varnish, put it into a separate container so that I'm not, you know, getting that grunge that's down at the bottom there. But and I'm just going to get started on it. And you can see, just kind of watch. I'll discuss this for a second, and then but if you look at what's going on there, you've got that saw kerf there, right? Now just kind of watch what happens. And it's just starting to come out, and it'll get better in about 5-10 minutes, but I'm starting to see some multi-toning there. I love the darkness down here, but I also like that little bit of edging in there that's a lighter color. So it's not all black. Instead, it's just coming out in this multi-tones, which to me looks awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and finish varnishing this. So everybody has their own techniques for varnishing, but to me, on this rustic stuff, with all that grain and everything that's going on, all these corners, it's like, just get it on there, you know, get it everywhere, let it drip, let it run for a bit. Well, then just start waiting, you know, like a minute, couple minutes, and then I already closed the can because I know I have varnish everywhere that I want it. And now I'm just going to be going back and forth very lightly, and eventually I'll probably have 0 drips when I'm done. And I could get fancy and try to set up a hanger for it to hang it and all that kind of stuff, but I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm just getting her done. It's starting to look pretty good, by the way. All right, getting low on water. Again, paint suppliers, like you know, like the retailers, the paint stores, they don't like to get the word out on this because this is really one heck of a way to save a lot of money on both thinner, the time on thinner, the sustainability of thinner, but also, and again, these are like, this is probably $1.50, that brush. This one's probably $1. And after a while, you just toss them and then just go on to the next one. And, you know, I should mention that you're going to get a little more hair out of these, you know, and stuff like that than you are on a fine brush. So again, if I was doing this for a customer, I'd probably do this for the first pass. And then the second one, I'd start to go into a $25 or a $30 brush, you know. And then I still would probably use the water thing. I would just make sure I clean it a lot more. But it would end up being pretty darn nice at the end of the second coat, if not a third. Usually what I do on something like this, I do a first coat here, really get it on thick. And then, like, there were some spots that were, that had a little bit of checking in them, and I kind of put it in there where I can. Next time it'll be a little further. So again, by the time we're done, if you rub a dust rag on there, even though it's rustic and it's got some curve to it, that dust rag is not going to grab on there, and you're not going to get that lint and everything, right? Okay, so that's where we're at right now. Now it's just time to let it dry, go grab some lunch, and maybe take a bike ride. Let's just see. Right, so it is now a day later. These had, actually, this is the one that I just did. It's the prototype number 2. And it sat overnight, kind of near the fire pit, so it's plenty dry. And then since I'm doing that, I'm gonna put one more coat on prototype number 1. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna sand first on both of them. I don't get crazy on it. I think I have about 100, 110 grit on there. And then I'm gonna sand them first, and then I'll go into the varnishing part. So this is where I'm starting to break down that rough texture so that it's basically usable in a bedroom and other places where you're going to be dusting them with a dust rag, right? Because again, if it's too rough, and you've seen a lot of that around, and right now this piece, for instance, would be way too rough. It would grab the rag would probably catch on it, and then you'd have lint that sticks to that. But this is where, after you have that first coat of varnish on, then if you sand them, it takes, you know, I don't know what it does. It keeps the three-dimensional appearance of the grit, or of the saw curve and the teeth marks and so on. But at the same time, it now starts to really smooth it out. So that's where I'm at right now by doing this second sanding after the first varnish. So here again, and don't worry about this if it looks like, you know what, right? It's got all this goofy, you think you're ruining it, you're wrecking it, and then, but I'm going up onto this edge again, and then I'm starting to start getting down into some of these little spots like here inside there. You can't feel it with the camera, but I can feel it with my fingers. And then let's see, once there was another spot. Where did I see that? Okay, over here. And again, I'm going into there. You can see a little bit of shininess. That means I haven't touched it with the sander yet, but I'm starting to work on these a little bit. And then I came up in here and catching those. And again, it really looks bad right now, but you'll see what happens. So let's continue with doing that. So I wonder why I have dust all over my GoPro camera. Anyhow, so it looks pretty bad, right? But we're going to do two things next on that. Comes in really handy. It gets most of it off. Other than the compressor, I let it go last night without turning it on, so it's a little low on pressure right now. All right, so did the brush thing, you saw that, took it out of the water, shook it against a stick in my scrap bin. Okay, so this piece, again, has now got its second coat, and then because the joinery is already on there, I can go ahead and I can set this someplace on the end of a table or whatever. Try to do this without ruining my camera. All right, so that now has its second coat on it. I'm good with that. Again, this is a prototype, so I want to just make sure I get 2 nice coats on it. That'll be it. Now we have our second prototype basically done, except for joinery. I did not do the joinery on this one yet, like I did on prototype number 1. That's already done. I could have done it earlier, didn't make any difference. That's also why I didn't clean up the Gorilla Glue on the ends, because we're gonna get rid of that in a different way anyhow. So there we go, time to dry.